Detective Pikachu stars Ryan Reynolds and Justice Smith, and obviously takes place in the Pokemon universe. We follow this young insurance agent named Tim Goodman, who goes off to Rhyme City, this city where humans and Pokemon work together in harmony, instead of the Pokemon having to be out in the wild and everybody just capture them and use them for battles. Everybody lives in harmony. He goes to Rhyme City after he learns that his father has died, and while trying to tie up some loose ends in his father's apartment, he comes across a Pikachu in a deerstalker hat, you know, that quintessential detective hat that everybody thinks of whenever they think of old-time Sherlock Holmes. And somehow he can actually communicate with this Pikachu. They can actually speak words to each other and understand each other completely. And it's kind of weird. This Pikachu, who claims to be a world-class detective, theorizes that Tim's father has actually gotten caught up in something and that he's not actually really dead. So the two team up in order to get to the bottom of things. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on Pokemon. I did not grow up with it, and maybe that was because I didn't really grow up with Nintendo consoles. The first time I ever got a console or a handheld was maybe high school, or maybe a little bit earlier, but I never got into Pokemon specifically. And I got into it specifically because my wife, Mallory's a big fan, has been a lifelong fan of the franchise, and, you know, she introduced me to the anime, she helped introduce me to the games. My first one was Pokemon Moon. We own Let's Go Eevee, which I've played multiple times. I really love that game, and each time I experience something new with Pokemon, not necessarily new to this, to the world, but new personally to me, my love for the universe and its inhabitants grow larger. So I was really excited for this movie ever since the first trailer, a part of which I actually just intercutted into this video, which is the first time that I've done anything like that. So I'm actually excited to see what else I can do to play around with my video editor and see what else I can put in there, but I'll have to try on a later date when I have time to experiment. Now, before we go any further, I do want to throw in a disclaimer of mine that I always throw in for those of the uninitiated, you know, those who've never seen any of my videos. The way that I convey my thoughts on a movie is that I do a pro and con list, you know, just to showcase what I feel is the good and the bad of a film, you know, in my opinion. And I try to keep these sections separate, but sometimes I will use one pro and one con to transition off of one another. It just depends on if I think I can swing that. Yep, okay, that's it. So there's your disclaimer. Let's go ahead and get into the review. Easily the best part of this movie is Detective Pikachu himself. Ryan Reynolds does a fantastic job voicing this Pikachu with a coffee addiction and a penchant for crime solving, and the scenes involving him just giving color commentary on everything around him is gold. They're just amazing highlights, and actually all of the comedic bits, which are pretty much all Ryan Reynolds, worked mainly because of him. The film is centered primarily in Rhyme City, you know, which I said before is where humans and Pokemon live together in harmony, and the Pokemon don't have to worry about being hunted or being put in tournaments and battles unless it's through an illegal circuit inside the city. And this city feels very lived in. I can really believe that this is a real city that just happens to have Pokemon in it. And they do a great job at showcasing the idea of this city that does not actually have Pokemon battling with each other for their trainer's glory. You see instances where Pokemon are just going through their normal day, having normal jobs. You see Squirtles fighting fires with firefighters. You see Machamps directing traffic. You see all of these different practical applications for many Pokemon. Not all of them, but a fair amount to where you can actually get a feel for this place. And speaking of the Pokemon, they are the stars of this film, but I mean, that's kind of what we wanted, wasn't it? I mean, I go in whenever I go into anything Pokemon, whether it's the anime or the games, I go in specifically for the Pokemon. I don't necessarily go in for the people, even if they may be interesting characters. It's just, you know, that's not what I'm going in for. And I think that may be the same for most people, but it's it is for me personally. Seeing the Pokemon, whether they are used as Easter eggs or used in a practical, more story-relevant way, just made me really happy. I even got to see species that I've never personally seen before, and I'm probably going to say this a lot throughout the film, but it just makes my enthusiasm for this world, this universe to, you know, get much bigger, for that enthusiasm for going deeper into the lore and all of these beautiful, beautiful characters. Just, I get more excited each time. This is also a great way to look at what Pokemon could look like in the real world. I think, you know, almost every species looks amazing despite the fact that they're completely CGI, which was a worry that I did have going in, that maybe they all wouldn't look too great, but they really do. There is one Pokemon, however, one Pokemon character that shown that had the uncanny valley issue, you know, where you just look and you're like, that's not real, there's no way this is real. And I can say this because he's shown in the marketing, but it's Mewtwo. He's got that unfinished, glossy look about him, and it just pulled me out of the film each and every time that he showed up. But, keeping with the positives of the Pokemon, the action sequences where we, you know, where it involves any kind of Pokemon are very exciting, as well as just made me feel more excited about the idea of potentially getting more movies that focus more on the battling and the capturing and the tournaments and whatnot. The story itself also surprised me. They took this universe that puts a lot of emphasis on the size of the world and the inhabitants in there, all these colorful inhabitants. And, you know, while they put the emphasis on it in the world building that I mentioned earlier, they decided to tell a grounded crime detective story, a relatively small story inside of this big sandbox, and I do applaud them for going that way. I feel like most other filmmakers would have just tried to go for the gold, I can't speak today, and just, you know, went straight for what Pokemon is known for, the battles and the catching, and maybe the majority of casual moviegoers who've never experienced anything Pokemon, maybe other than Pokemon Go, maybe they wouldn't have been as interested. But starting with this kind of story, a film noir story, that helps open up the film to a bigger audience and will definitely help with getting the mainstream audience more on board with Pokemon films. You know, that maybe do focus on those core elements of battling and capturing. However, it's not a perfect story. There are a lot of elements that make no sense. There's some small plot holes throughout, and so much telling and not showing, so much exposition. We seem to be getting a lot of this in movies, you know, that's sort of talked down to the audience. Now, exposition is not a bad thing, especially in crime stories and detective stories. You can expect a bit of it, and it makes sense, but a lot of times Tim and Pikachu just don't learn things on their own. They have to rely on other people telling them things, basically explaining everything outright, as well as these holographic video recordings of others just, you know, just basically explaining to the audience what's going on, and those pop up occasionally, so it never really felt like our main characters were really uncovering things on their own. And let's continue that talk with the story and how everything ties together by talking about the human characters. The human characters in this movie are all really stupid and terribly written. There is not one forgivable human being in this movie, especially this one girl who serves as the love interest for Tim, who is just introduced as an exposition machine, and that's pretty much all she ends up being for the rest of the film. And there were even the majority part in the film where I was just looking at the main character, and I was annoyed and bored with him because he did nothing but bitch for a long time, and really that's not Justice Smith's fault. He did give a good performance, but it's just in how they wrote his character in order to give him development over the course of the film, because they start him off as this boring and annoying guy who just brings down the tone of the room everywhere that he goes. The first 10 minutes of the film are very bitter to watch, not just because of the fact that Tim's dad is pronounced Dad, but mainly because Tim doesn't care about it. He just wants to do everything that he's supposed to, and then just leave and not even care. He doesn't even care about anything until his love interest proves useful in finding him, and he just wants to get rid of this Pikachu so that he can just move back onto his life. So, you know, he just goes into it, but for the majority, he does not care, which in turn made me not care, and I feel like that's going to be an issue with some people who watch this movie. This last part is also a nitpick, and I want to go into detail with it, but it is kind of a major spoiler, but I'll be as vague as possible. A few months ago, I made this theory about how certain things tie together in the movie, especially closer to the end, specifically involving Tim's dad, Harry, and I personally didn't like the idea. I thought it was a bit of a cop-out and hoped that I wasn't right. Sadly, I was right, but the good thing was that it didn't take away from the movie as much as I thought it would, so that's something. And I will conclude my thoughts on Detective Pikachu with just this small summary. Despite the rampant exposition throughout the film that just talks down to the audience straight, questionable CGI on Mewtwo, and horribly written human characters, the film gave me what I really wanted and what the trailers promised, an entertaining time at the theaters, and it has really hyped up my excitement for more movies in this world. This is definitely the best adaptation of a video game property to the big screen that I've ever seen, and I really hope that this movie is profitable enough to warrant more live-action Pokemon. And now I just want to take time and say thank you guys for watching, and also to throw in a few more disclaimers. If you enjoyed the video, please don't hesitate to hit that like button, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so that you can keep up to date with everything that's going on the channel. And also, don't forget to go down in the comments section and just talk about what I've mentioned here. You know, what are your guys' opinions on the film? Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Anything like that. Just let me know. I enjoy hearing what you guys think. And, actually, yeah, that's pretty much it. All that's left to say is farewell until the next video, all you casual moviegoers and movie fans alike, and keep on being awesome.